Imagine all the people living there in peace, and you take it, Will Ferrell, in a different key. I didn't see Will Ferrell taking it.
I don't think Will Ferrell wants it.
Yeah, I guess not. Welcome back to StillerBros at the Movies, from the director of A Quiet Place and the producer of Deadpool comes a whimsical movie about imaginary friends. Yeah, this is a weird kind of combination.
Yes, today we are seeing If.
And this is a kind of an interesting movie for one simple reason. It's a family movie aimed at kind of younger audiences, but it's also an auteur project by an up-and-coming director who, with a very good track record so far.
I mean, I wouldn't call him up and coming. He has a very big name, and that is, of course, John Krasinski, whose previous work is A Quiet Place 1 and A Quiet Place Part 2.
Of course, he did a few little comedy movies way back before A Quiet Place, but John Krasinski has slowly been making his way into directing movies in a way that nobody would have thought. Like, usually when an actor starts directing movies, it's just kind of like, okay, he'll do a couple little projects so that he can, like, have big acting roles and give himself meaty parts. But then John Krasinski's like, nah, I'm gonna be like it for M. Night Shyamalan didn't run out of steam, like, halfway through.
Yeah. You look at his filmography, it comes off as very interesting, especially with the fact that he's also had a very eclectic television career. And then suddenly his breakout into films was not as an actor, but as a director.
Yeah, like he started his his biggest career move was starring in some comedy series called The Office, which I guess his co-stars one of the people from this movie.
Yeah, some guys named Steve Carell?
Huh. But, I mean, like, The Office, such a generic title. I mean, there's probably a reason why no one talks about it anymore.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, the fact that he made A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2 was already kind of weird enough, because it's like, oh, the sitcom guy is making a weird horror movie with, like, the gimmick of no one can talk. And then suddenly they were good. They were better than they had any right to be, than anyone would have expected from a guy whose directing credits were a couple of little comedy movies that no one really saw.
Yeah, who knew the guy who starred in License to Wed had horror movies in him?
And of course, not long after that, this movie comes out, and it's like, that's quite the 180 after you suddenly establish yourself as a horror director.
I mean, that's pretty much the reason why they're not advertising him as this movie as from the director of A Quiet Place.
But let's get into the actual movie. If short for imaginary friend.
It is a movie about lost and forgotten imaginary friends, with a protagonist who can see imaginary friends, being a small young child who can see imaginary friends, including one particular, the main one of the entire story, being a creature named Blue.
Should we address the Eduardo in the room?
I think we should.
Okay, back in the early '80s, their Cartoon Network had this TV show called Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, which was a show about a foster home of imaginary friends. You get it? But the basic idea was that the creator of Powerpuff Girls was creating a show about imaginary friends who had lost their kids and were trying to find new homes so that they could live on and make other kids happy.
And the protagonist of that was a young child who could see all the imaginary friends, and his imaginary friend was a rounded creature named Blue.
Of course, there are differences here, and they're like small differences, but the fact that this is also a movie about imaginary friends who have outgrown their kids and just want to find ways to live on afterwards is just kind of a weird coincidence. Like, I looked it up and I did the math. John Krasinski was a childless adult when Foster started airing. So the only way he would have been exposed to the show while it was airing would be if, one, he's one of those adults who regularly catches up on the Cartoon Network, or two, he would have seen the ever-present advertising that was around when that show was airing. Like, seriously, for a little while, the characters from that show were basically the mascots of Cartoon Network.
They had like 3 or 4 years where it was in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
But either way, I don't think John Krasinski purposefully took this concept. I think it's just kind of a case of imaginary friends are this very simple yet creative idea that you can do a lot in. Like one of Craig McCracken's closest collaborators, Genndy Tartakovsky, was going to be doing something kind of similar with imagination and everything like that. That movie's kind of in production hell right now, but that's neither here nor there.
Hell, Craig McCracken did an episode of Imaginary Friends with Powerpuff Girls.
But I think the idea was more, it's a story that you can do a lot in. And when it comes to what this movie is actually about, it seems to be about something more than just, hey, what if animal shelters were full of imaginary friends instead of animals?
Yeah, and with these imaginary friends in this movie, we get a lot of creative designs, but we also get a lot of creative casting.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest Oscar-winning and nominated voice casts of a movie like this. Like, just the people who we feel comfortable pointing out are in there. There's Richard Jenkins,
Paula Bridge, Bradley Cooper, Jon Stewart, Keegan-Michael Key,
Sam Rockwell. The list goes on, and it's
Emily Blunt, Blake Lively, Awkwafina.
Basically everyone who owes John Krasinski and star and co-producer Ryan Reynolds a favor is in this movie.
Yeah. And they've been keeping a lot of the plot to this under wraps in the advertising.
I mean, they give us the basic rundown of this girl can see imaginary friends. They need her to help them find new kids after their kids have outgrown them. It's kind of one of those things. And this is a movie based on kind of early aughties whimsy movie. And it's one of those things where the whimsy of it can be either overbearing or just not big enough. And it's one of those movies where you can just kind of see the wheels turning and think this could either be a instant classic or a train wreck. And we don't know what it is, but I honestly will always hope for the former over the latter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect a huge amount of things that would be exciting about it, but I expect this to be cute and I expect to enjoy myself.
And yeah, let's talk a little bit about the human cast too, because like we said, Ryan Reynolds is in this movie. That guy who was a total nobody until Deadpool, when he starred in movies like Just Friends, Definitely Maybe, The Proposal, X-Men Origins Wolverine, The Green Lantern.
This is all, of course, according to a shitbag.
Yeah, this is all according to a guy who definitely has reasons that he would want to ruin the career of one of the most philanthropic and business-savvy guys in Hollywood today. TJ Miller sucks.
Yeah.
But also, the lead star of this movie is Kaylee Fleming, who most people will probably know as Judith Grimes from The Walking Dead. We've never really seen The Walking Dead.
It sucks. I have, it sucks.
And she also played young Rey in Star Wars The Force Awakens and young Sylvie in one of Loki. So basically this is the first big movie that she is starring in and not just playing the young version of another character. She's basically the brunette McKenna Grace.
Pretty much.
But we've got a lot of cartoony animation. Michael Giacchino is doing the score.
And this is set to be the final performance of the late great Louis Gossett Jr.
The Oscar-winning star of Enemy Mine. It's not what he won the Oscar for, it's just the only movie of his that we know off the top of our head.
Yeah.
And it's only because The Lonely Island made a joke about it in their podcast. Anyway, I've got medium hopes for this. It seems like a fun time. Ryan Reynolds in promotional material compared it to a live-action Pixar movie, and it's not hard to see why, because this is a very Pixarian premise.
Yeah.
Along with very Pixarian character designs, but still, it's a
Pixar. I mean, we do have a Pixar movie that already will be focusing on imagination later this year. next month, in fact.
Yeah, it's not hard to see how this would feel like it. And plus, apparently, John Krasinski came up with the idea for this in a very similar way to how Pete Docter came up with Inside Out. So it's not hard to see how this kind of thing shook out. And also, it's, according to a lot of critics, it's very heartwarming, if a little confused. We'll see how we feel when we walk out of it.
Yeah.
But we'll bring tissues, we'll hopefully enjoy what we see, and I mean, we like most of the actors that are in this, and the premise seems solid, and maybe this will be one of those movies that critics are mid on at one point, and then the kids who grew up watching it will love it all the same. It could be a goofy movie.
I don't know. I wouldn't go that far, but we'll see.
Either way, I guess we'll see. We'll have to wait and see, and we'll see you guys after the jump. The next morning, I will take no slander from that.
Don't notice that we're going in a different direction and the sun is coming up from a different direction than it was going down earlier. Just ignore it.
Anyway,
I mean, it was cute.
It has its moments, but also it's got a very weird, almost overly complicated plot to it. Let's talk about this. So, I think that the performances are pretty good. Like, Keely Fleming
She was in most of the movies, so she has to carry a lot of it.
She mines a lot of emotion from the character. She kind of goes back and forth between the typical Thunder kid, I'm not a kid anymore because I went through this really depressing thing in my life, and I'm going through even more depressing things in my life, so therefore I'm going to be stoic and insist I'm not a kid. But also that means that when she's able to wring emotion out of the character, that you actually feel all the emotions.
Yeah. And then Ryan Reynolds is just being typical Ryan Reynolds. There's not really much to it.
Like, it's one of those things where it's basically Deadpool with a little bit of depressing edge to it, because he's got this secret that makes him just kind of bitter about certain things.
There's also the fact that this is not really a meta movie. Like, they're not commenting on anything. There's no, like, well, that happened kind of humor.
Well, for a movie starring Deadpool and Jim from The Office, there's weirdly no one looking at the okay, there's one scene of someone looking at the camera, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be an in-universe home movie.
And then we have Steve Carell and George Clooney and Matt Damon and Jon Stewart and all of these big role actors in these roles, and some of them were in it more than we thought they would be.
Like, the fact that you listed George Clooney second and didn't list Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Yeah, that was something I was thinking about as I was talking, but
George Clooney is in this movie a lot more than the fact that he was announced like 2 weeks ago would give you any indication.
Yeah, and then Phoebe Waller-Bridge is like the bigger friend in this movie, not like
they focus on, like, the focus is on Blue because he's the big, cuddly, marketable, furry thing, but
he's not doing much throughout the movie other than kind of being like, we see more of Blossom, the character that Phoebe Waller-Bridge plays.
Though, but then again, kind of a thing with the movie is that it doesn't seem to focus a lot on the ifs.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that they're there is just kind of, it's fun, and you get a lot of interesting visual gags, and a lot of them are creatively designed, but obviously the focus is not on them, it's on the human characters like Bea and Cal. But even then, it's just a case of, well, you don't give them much. Like, there's this point in the middle of the movie where they suddenly realize, wait, this isn't working, so let's try a completely different thing.
They don't do a good job of laying it out, though.
And them deciding to do that ends up creating this idea to kind of bring pathos from the characters. But then they only do it like twice in like short, effective but short sequences.
Yeah, it's a very visually good movie, just on the visuals of it and all.
John Krasinski is nothing if not a competent director.
Yeah. And there's a lot of pull at your heartstring moments and everything. It's just the middle part of it drags a lot, and it felt like, and there's a lot of times where it just kind of felt like it was going on a lot of stuff was going on a lot longer than it probably should have, and it just kind of felt a little, not like it was explaining why we were getting to certain ideas better, as good as it probably could have.
I mean, I'll give it this. It does have a lot of visual moments where it will subtly hint at something. Like, there's this sequence where they travel back to 1920s Coney Island, and there's a island, and you see like these teddy bears hanging up on one of the games that resembles Louis Gossett Jr.'s character, and you're like, oh, so that's where he came from, and stuff like that, and that little hints like that, or like reading Alice in Wonderland at the beginning,
or seeing Harvey playing on a TV screen.
Just stuff like that, where it's like we're made abundantly clear where John Krasinski was getting his visual inspiration for this movie from. And not to say that that's bad, just pointing it out, and just pointing out that that's a thing that this movie does. Through it all, we've got these heartwarming moments interspersed with a plot that's kind of all over the place.
And then there's a twist at the end that kind of makes you question, what did the entire movie?
It's kind of a Sixth Sense style twist where you just where you're like, okay, I might need to rewatch this movie just to kind of see where all the pieces of this line up.
But then if you think about it even more, you're like, did any of this actually go the way that the movie presents itself? Because there's certain things where you're like, did this actually do what was happening in the moment in the movie? So it's got you thinking, but maybe not in the way that it probably hoped you would.
There's also things like Michael Giacchino's score is a very Michael Giacchino score. It's a very Inside Out type score of his, where it's got like whistles and big whimsical fills and everything like that.
Yeah. And the special effects are great. The animation on the Imaginary Friends is great and everything.
It's great for what it needs to be. Like, you can't, like, they're obviously CGI. You don't ever think this character is supposed to be here. But it's also things like Blue's fur is very good, and Baby Waller-Bridge looks perfectly like an old school Rubber Hose cartoon.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff to like about this movie, but ultimately it's a little underwhelming.
Yeah, I can't say I don't recommend it for someone with littler kids, but I'm not sure I would recommend it as a whole.
It's an okay movie. I'm not mad I watched it or anything. It was a very sweet time at the movies.
But otherwise, it's just okay.
Yeah.
When something like this probably demands that it needs to be this big, heartwarming expression, I'll give it this. It's probably one of the better Pixar knockoffs that you can probably see.
Yeah.
Even though calling it a knockoff seems mean.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know what else to say. I think that might be it.
Yeah.
So be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave a like if you liked it, leave in the comments what you may or may not have thought of if, and don't forget to tune in next time when, oh, what a day, what a lovely day! Bye.